Now, because multiplication and division and addition and subtraction have different rules, we have to pay a little bit more attention when we have a problem that deals with both of these operations. And here we have a problem down here where we have multiplication and subtraction. So we're going to look to math to give us a little bit of direction. When we have multiplication and division as well as addition and subtraction, we are going to follow the standard order of operations. And in math, that's also often remembered by this little mnemonic, "Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally." And this stands for parentheses. We do what's in parentheses first. Then we do any exponents next. Then we do multiplication and division from left to right, and then addition and subtraction left to right. So here it is in a little flow chart. We do what's in parentheses first, then we do exponents, then we do multiplication and division from left to right, and addition and subtraction from left to right. Now typically what we'll be seeing in this class are things in parentheses and the multiplication and division as well as the addition and subtraction. Very rarely are we going to use anything taken to a power, except when we deal with our exponents. So let's look at this example here. So we have several operations going on here. We have multiplication, we have subtraction, and then we have our parentheses. So according to our order of operations, we do what's in parentheses first, and so I subtract 2.3 from 5.67, and this is what my calculator tells me. Now we don't round until the very, very end. So what I need to do is I need to keep track of where my last significant figure is. When we're looking at subtracting and adding values, remember that our answer is as precise as our least precise value. These two values have different precisions. This has 2 places after the decimal point, and this has 1 place after the decimal point. So our final answer, when rounded, will only have 1 place after the decimal point. Now we don't round to the very end, so what I need to do is when I write down my answer, I'm going to underline where my last sig fig is. So now that I've done my subtraction, I have one operation left, which is the multiplication. When I multiply these two values together, this is the value that my calculator gives me. Now I have to go back and look at how to round. In multiplication, what I do is we look at the least number of sig figs. This value has 4 sig figs, and even though I used all 3 numbers to do my math, I have to round, look at how I need to round. This value, if it were recorded in correct sig figs, would only have 2 sig figs. This value and then the last allowable digit. So the 2 sig figs, which is indicated by my last allowable digit here, is what I use to see how I need to round my answer. This has 4 sig figs, and this value has 2 sig figs. So my final answer can only have 2 sig figs. Here's my last allowable digit. I look to the right. 7 is greater than 5, so my final answer is 12, which has 2 sig figs according to my multiplication rules. So pause the voice lecture and go ahead and work through these 4 examples and see what your answers are, and I'll go over the answers in the next slide. When we look at example A, we have 2 different operations, multiplication and division. However, the rules for significant figures are the same for multiplication and division. So what we do is we go from left to right, and you would put this into your calculator, 1.10 times 0.5120 times 4.015, and then divide it by 3.455. The answer that your calculator gives you is going to be 0.65219. The rule for multiplication and division is we count the number of sig figs, and our answer has the same number as the value with the least number. This value here has 3 sig figs. This value has 4 sig figs. This value has 5 sig figs. and this value also has 5 sig figs. So 3 sig figs is the smallest number of significant figures, so our answer can only have 3 sig figs. Our 2 is the last allowable digit. I look to the right, 1 is less than 5, so 0.652 is the correct answer. B also has 2 operations, addition and subtraction, but the rule is the same for both of these operations. So we do the math first, and then we go back and see which value is the least precise and round our answer to have the same precision. When we write our addition and subtraction problems in the column format, it is very easy to see where our last allowable digit is. Right here, this 0.1 is the least precise value, and that's as far as our answer can go. So here's the answer that our calculator gives us, 4.8730. Our least precise value only has one place value after the decimal point, so our answer can only have one place value after the decimal point. 8 is our last allowable place value. I look to the right, 7 is greater than 5, so our answer rounds to 4.9. Now problem C, we're going to have to use our order of operations. We want to do what is in parentheses first, and we don't want to round, but we do want to indicate where our last allowable significant digit is going to be. These values have different precisions. Our least precise value has 2 places after the decimal point, so when we get our answer, we're going to indicate that our last significant figure is the second place value after the decimal point. After we do what's in parentheses, then we're going to do multiplication and division left to right. So when we do our subtraction here, our answer does not have a whole number part. It's 0.3455, and I'm going to underline the 4 because that's the second place value after my decimal point, which is my last allowable sig fig according to my rules for subtraction. But I write the whole number out. Then I go back and I multiply 4.562 by 3.99870. Then I divide that answer by 0.3455, and this is the answer that my calculator gives me. Now I have to go back and count sig figs. This value here, even though it was 0.3455, was only 2 sig figs because the second place value after the decimal point was my last allowable digit. So this answer here is only going to have 2 sig figs, which is clearly less than these values. My final answer can only have 2 sig figs. Here's my last allowable digit, the 2. I look to the right, that's greater than 5, so my final answer in correct sig figs is going to be 53. D is also a problem where we have to follow our order of operations. We're going to multiply these two values first, and then underline where our last allowable digit is, and then do our subtraction. When I multiply these two values together, I get 8.162. I'm going to underline the 1 because according to my rules, my answer can have as many sig figs as the value with the least number of sig figs. This value here has 2 sig figs. This has 4. So my answer can only have 2 sig figs. I'm not going to round until the very end, but I'm going to keep track of the fact that that 1 was my last allowable sig fig. Then I'm going to subtract. When I subtract, I get 0.142. Now why do I only have 1 sig fig here? Well, back here when I did my multiplication, my 0.1 was my last sig fig, and that was 1 place value from the decimal point. That is less precise than my 0.02. So therefore my final answer can only have as many places after the decimal point as the value with the least number. So this, when I looked at its correct sig figs, had 0.1 as its last sig fig, which is less precise than my 0.02. So I do the math. Here is my last allowable sig fig, one place after the decimal point. I look to the right of it. 4 is less than 5, so this stays as 0.1.